Good evening, and welcome. Good evening. No, the mic is fine. We just got rabble-rousers in the room. Welcome. What a wonderful night at the Wichita Art Museum, always and most especially with Murdock Society patrons. We are absolutely hopping here with public programs and school tours and family programs. Just to let you in on a little secret, I don't know if you saw some of the signs that we have around the building. We have signs around the building that say, "Excuse our mess, please be patient with us." We've already begun early phase of a renovation project, and in particular want our patrons to be aware, January through March, it really will be a mess and mayhem here. Really proud of the board to step forward and decide to do some renovations with our entry and acquire a cool array of wonderful furniture that we'll put in our Farha Great Hall so that it turns into a fun lounge space, and a pretty significant renovation in our living room too. So. Good that you're here now. It's not too much mess and mayhem, but it will be later. At any rate, super excited this evening to welcome and hear from artist Preston Singletary, a glass artist as a sculptor, and we're soon to learn all about that. But first, want to acknowledge that this concludes our Murdock Mixology program for the year, and as I do that, I really need to acknowledge the wonderful king and queen of the Murdock Society, Tony and Bud Gates. We are already well underway with organization for 2020. We're going to do a trip to Bentonville. Many of you will recall it was a bit ago, I think a year and a half or 2 years ago, that the Crystal Bridges Museum of American Art director Rod Bigelow came and talked about The Momentary. It opens at the end of February, and so we're going to go down there at the beginning of June. And the feature that I particularly remember and want to go and test is their rooftop bar. At any rate, thank you, Tony and Bud. I don't even think I'd want to do this job without you. I think in the Pacific Northwest there must be something that's in the water there that transforms enough of the population into a glass artist. So even Dale Chihuly started out in life eager to be a fiber artist, a textile artist, and lo and behold, he became a glass artist. Singletary started out in life with a childhood friend of Dante Marioni. Okay, Dante was the son of Paul Marioni, who is a legendary, amazing glass artist. And the pixie dust in the Seattle area apparently just worked its magic, and now both Dante and Preston are internationally regarded glass artists. Wanted to invite Preston Singletary here in advance of an amazing exhibition that we will open on February 1st, so of course you'll all be back for that evening. The exhibition is Preston Singletary, Raven and the Box of Daylight. With that exhibition, we are collaborating with our friends across the street, and some of them, all three of them are right over here, the Mid-American All-Indian Center, and we're welcoming April Scott, Aaron Rao, and Michelle Conan, the director of the center, the director of the museum, and the education director, and we're thrilled to be able to partner with them. And in the line of partnerships, the exhibition you'll see, and Preston's not talking about it this evening, but it is an immersive, theatrical, incredible environment. And as a glass artist, Preston reached out to find a talent that could help him realize the best of his vision. And the person he found for that is Juniper Shui, who's also here from Seattle to help figure out stuff. So Juniper's here too. So Singletary worked his way in life and found training really with the very best. He credits Dante Marioni and Benjamin Moore, both incredibly talented and accomplished glass artists. He also has a really critical connection to the Pilchuck School of Glass. Now, not everybody in the room maybe is familiar with Pilchuck, but it's a glass school that Dale Chihuly and some friends founded in the woods outside of Seattle. It's grown and grown over the years. It is now worldwide regarded. If you are a glass artist, you need to spend a tenure at Pilchuck, and Preston was a student, was an assistant, was a teacher, and now he's a board member. So very connected there. He also went for training at Kosta Boden in Sweden. He found amazing training and mentorship with a number of Italian glass masters, Lino Tagliapietra and Pino Signoretti. He's an artist who uniquely interesting combines multiple traditions. So he pulls together really the best of technical glass mastery with his Native American ancestry. He descended from the Tlingit clan, and that's a Native American clan that is anchored in southeastern Alaska, and he infuses their traditions with incredible contemporary glass art, which we're about to see. He found amazing success in critical raves across the years. He exhibits worldwide at this point, and he's been collected by none other than the British Museum, which is in London, other museums in France and Sweden, the National Museum of Scotland in the United States, the Museum of Fine Arts in Boston, the Museum of Art and Design in New York, the Smithsonian in Washington, D.C., the leading art museums in Detroit, Denver, Phoenix, and I would say everywhere on the West Coast, from Anchorage to Los Angeles. He was honored by the Corning Museum of Glass in 2003 with their Rakow Commission, and in 2010, the University of Puget Sound gave him their honorary doctorate. Quite accomplished artist. We're thrilled that he's here this evening, and we're even more thrilled that he's coming back and he's going to feature his work in an exhibition that opens February 1st. Preston, welcome to Wichita, and welcome to the podium.
So I will start by saying, Preston ach sayi linget ke nach kochen duasak kagwantan nach hutsati sial kwanayachat. It's a few small words in the Tlingit language, introduce myself. Wish I had time to focus on the language a little more, but time doesn't permit that. So I said that my name is Preston. My Tlingit name is Kochain. I come from the Kagwantan clan, from the Tlingit tribe in the southeast of Alaska, and I live in Seattle. So here we go. Long story short, my great-grandmother, who's the woman pictured in the center here, she was from Sitka, Alaska. Her name is Susie Johnson Bartlett Gubatayo. She grew up around the turn of the century. She lived till about 1981. So I knew her. She lived to be 100 years old. We spent a lot of time with her. This was when she was in the sewing school in Sitka. This was, so she was widowed in 1919. George Bartlett would be my blood great-grandfather, was killed in a sawmill accident, and she remarried this man, Dionisio Gubatayo, who was a Filipino man had traveled the world and ended up in Alaska, and fell in love with my great-grandmother, and took her and her 4 kids to Seattle. So they relocated to Seattle, had some more kids, And so that's who I remember as my great-grandmother, my step-great-grandfather there. This is me and my son, who is he's 19 years old now, but I love this photo. He is, anyway, he's all grown up and going to college and all that, but this is us in some of the traditional regalia that I would wear to represent my family and tribal community. As I mentioned, the Kagwantan, this was a street, I guess, that we owned, maybe, up in Sitka somewhere. And this is my wife, who's, she's actually from Sweden. And as I grew up, my moiety from the Tlingit tribe is the eagle, and by tribal law, I must marry over to the opposite moiety, which is the raven. So I had to go a long way to find my raven on the other side of the world. And then we had a couple of kids. So this is a pretty complete overview of my life. I'll probably be accused of oversharing by the end of the evening, but this is what really makes up all of my creativity. This is the thing that kind of drives me. The music was my first passion, my first love, and this was a group that I had in the late 80s. I even have a couple of glass artist friends here, Roberta and Patrick over here that know me from this era, Pilchuck Glass School, and trying to make it as a musician, but it didn't really pan out for me, so I kind of fell back on my art career. So this is May 18th, 1980, and this was the eruption of Mount St. Helens, and this kind of, in a way, fostered my career in glass, because there were some artists in the Seattle area that took the ash from Mount St. Helens and they would melt the ash, and the basis of glass is silica. So what they would do is they would blow glass from this Mount St. Helens ash. And the factory was called the Glass Eye Studios, and that's where I trained for about, so directly out of high school, which I never completed, I ended up going to, I went straight into glass blowing at about age 19. So this is 1982. And so this factory was getting established, and at the time there just wasn't a lot of glass artists in the Northwest. And because of my connections with Dante Marioni and it was a buddy of mine from I was 15 years old, he was 14. And his father had connections, to the Pilchuck School, knew Dale Chihuly, all these people. So here we're working with Lino Tagliapietra, and then Benjamin Moore is the man that's on the right with the glasses, peering over his glasses. And this is the guy that I worked with for many, many years in his studio, working for many different artists that would come through and would use our team to execute their work. It was Benjamin Moore, Dan Daly, Ann Gardner. There was just many. So each week was a different, kind of sensibility. We were expected to make work for these people. Here we're working for Dale Chihuly, and Lino Tagliapietra, of course, is another major figure in my life who I learned a lot from, and then this guy too. So this was this. So I wanted to give you a little bit of a kind of this kind of talks a little bit about my inspiration for creativity. And in high school, we all were reading Carlos Castaneda. This was something that was, we were imagining these, great adventures that he was taking with his Mexican shaman. And basically what I got out of that was this idea of traveling within your dream. It was said, like, if you could find your hand in your dream and then you focus on the background beyond your hand, then you could start to travel around in your dream time. Well, I mean, I never really was able to do that, but it was something that was something that captured my curiosity, because I wasn't raised with any religious instruction. So I wasn't forced to go to church, and of course, I have Native American ancestry. My father's non-native, so it all comes from my mother's side. So this led me to read other things. Since I didn't go to college, I started to think about dream analysis, and Jung was one of the lead sort of, what do you call it? The psychologist that was studying the dream analysis, and took a particular interest in the Native American sort of vision quest, and so all of these things kind of came to me, this sort of confluence of things that I was reading about, trying to learn about, trying to experience. And Aikido was another thing that I did for a period of time, which was like, it's a martial art, but it's also, it's a self-defense, and it's a blending of energy when you have, the way that you practice. There's a lot of Zen Buddhism that is wrapped into the practice of this activity. And for me, it was interesting because as you're dealing with, somebody like lunging at you and you have to move and blend with it, I equated it actually with the process of glass blowing, because when we're blowing glass, you're moving with this material. It's all the way at the end of this blowpipe, but you're moving your body, and in some ways it correlated with me. That's what it meant to me, and so after I started practicing Aikido for a while, I found myself moving around the glass blowing studio a little bit differently, just moving from your center. And so in any case, these are all personal kind of awarenesses that I've adopted, and as a way to get to what I'm doing today, which so since I didn't go to art school, I ended up looking at art, and something that caught my interest was the surrealism, modernism, primitivism movements. The surrealists talked about Northwest Coast art as being some, abstract expressionism to some degree, because when you're looking at a design of Northwest Coast art, you can see many different angles of the figure, and it's very abstract. And so what I learned about modernism was that the modernists were, there was a quote from a native scholar, Renard Strickland, who said, it's ironic that it was the modernists who forced us to look at the primitive art, so-called primitive art, and appreciate differing levels of reality. And what they were really trying to do was to unlearn their process of art making. They were trying to look at African art, oceanic art, Native American art, and it led to primitivism. So there's a lot of interesting dialogue going on there when you look into that kind of that history, art history. So another component of that, of course, goes into the idea of storytelling, mythology, and so it's the Joseph Campbell kind of perspective that I kind of think about, and when I'm doing the work and I'm analyzing these stories. And so this is Joe David, who's become one of my most important mentors, and he's from the west coast of Vancouver Island. He's from the Nuu-chah-nulth tribe, but he's considered a master artist, and as a sort of a respected elder, we made a connection in the summer of 2000, and he brought me into the Native American ceremonies. He brought me into the Sweat Lodge, and we were up at the Pilchuck Glass School. So he was an artist in residence. I was his artist assistant. I was supposed to help him make glass for 2 weeks. And he goes, okay, I'll go up there, but I want to build a sweat lodge. And I was like, oh boy, I don't know about if that's going to work, because Pilchuck is in this beautiful region where this tree farm, and there's so I was worried about building this giant bonfire to heat up the stones for the sweat lodge, and I really didn't know anything about it. And he says, yeah, well, those of you who are interested, and come and talk to me, and after telling you what you need to know and looking into your eyes, I'll let you know if you're ready to do the sweat lodge. And I was like, okay. So that the day was getting closer and closer. We had to build the sweat lodge. We had to cut down these little saplings and sort of build the structure. And I was like, Joe, look into my eyes, man. It's like, you got to tell me, am I ready to do this? And he goes, well, let me put it this way. He goes, you better be. And I was like, he goes, oh, he's like, Preston, you're my number one guy. And so I said, okay, I'm there. I'll help you. And then we did the ceremony, and we did 4 sweats in about 11 days' time, and we invited the student, anybody who was at the session at Pilchuck at that time, to come into the sweat lodge and kind of go through the ceremony. And then on the fourth sweat lodge that we did, it was my birthday. We went in. It was a morning ceremony, so we went in at like 2 in the morning. We came out. It was daybreak, and then that evening he adopted me and he shared his name with me. And that was one of the things that on the Northwest Coast, that you can receive names throughout your lifetime that would be a significant change in maybe you become a house leader, so you adopt a name from a historic name, or in this case, he gave me the name Kakao Chief, which means transforming killer whale. And so that was a name that he carries, as it's an artist name. So, now onto the artwork. So for me, this whole process is becoming this genetic memory that I feel I'm sort of awakening in my own experience through all these activities and all this thought that's gone into it. So in about 1988, so from 82 to 88, I was going to Pilchuck. In 1988, I decided to try to put the design work onto the glass. I didn't really know what I was doing. I didn't know. I was a glass blower. I wasn't an illustrator or would draw anything. So, these elements are very, very specific. This design work is there's architecture and rules and regulations to make it look like traditional Northwest Coast native art. And so this form here is a bowl, but if you look at it, if you flip it upside down, it's like a traditional hat that comes from Alaska. So every glassblower has tried to make a form like this at one point or another, but I decided that I would try to draw the designs on there and carve them into the thickness of the glass. So I was dabbling in this about 1988, and this piece is from much later when I developed my technique, because I can edit my images and I don't have to show you the really awkward early work. But so my aunt was really pretty excited that I was working on these designs, and kind of communing or connecting with my culture and giving up the music career that I nearly had. But so she came to this holiday open house that we had at Benjamin Moore's studio, and so I had one of the early versions of one of these hats, and usually the artists, the assistants with me and all the other guys would have a little card table over in the corner, but Benjamin had these beautiful pedestals with these lights that were shining down, and my aunt said, well, can we put the hat on the pedestal? And I said, yeah, sure. So we took Benjamin's piece down, I put my hat up there, and about 10 people had gathered around to see, well, what's he doing with this? And I put it up there, and these shadows came through, and everybody's like, oh, look at that. And I said, well, yeah, that's what I intended all along. That was like the aha moment for me, and I realized at that time that this was something that like, oh, okay, well, what it has come to symbolize for me is like a spirit of the object that, these cave, explorers, and they walk through, and then this beam of light comes through and shines on the petroglyph right at the right moment. So, and in any case, that's kind of what how I come to feel about these. So I had to really reinvent myself. So it was like I was becoming, changing horses in the middle of the stream or whatever. All of this work is kind of the result of a lot of exploration, trial and error, and trying to make things that are make the designs look traditional. Just very kind of a stubborn approach, but this is kind of inspired by an albino killer whale that I saw a picture of a few years ago. This is all the best stuff. Again, as I said, but some of the details, so you can really get close to see some of these pieces, and the way that I try to interpret different forms, if they're birds or if they're like this is a mosquito. So this is a story of mosquito, how the origin of the mosquito, kind of in a nutshell, was that there was this cannibal giant that was absconding with children, and it's sort of like the boogeyman, like, oh, watch out for the boogeyman. And this is a traditional story. So as the story goes, there was a man who decided that he was going to track this beast, this animal that was taking the children. And so he tracked it, he found it, he ambushed it and clobbered it over the head with his club. And he said, I'm going to really do away with this animal, this beast, so it'll never come back and harm us ever again. And so he built this big fire, and he took the body of this animal, this beast, and he burned it. And then the embers from the body kind of like rose up off the fire, and then they transformed into mosquitoes, and they're still trying to eat us today. So that's how I try to bring some of the mythology and the storytelling into the work. I mean, they all have some reference of some kind of connection or story or animal symbol. This is a very traditional rendering of a rattle, but like a shaman's rattle, but doesn't have the purpose of what a shaman's rattle is. But this is how I play with the different forms as my skills begin to evolve, and just trying lots of different techniques and ways, presentations. And some of them are kind of abstract. Some of them are inspired by the modernist movement. Some of it, like this is not a traditional form, but it looks like a Noguchi or a Henry Moore or something along those lines. And so I get a lot of inspiration from looking at modernist art and then trying to appropriate it and take it and use it, do it something else with it. So yeah, a real variety. This, it's kind of back and forth. This is very traditional storage box, and this is Fog Woman. She's changing back from a human form back into fog. This is a cormorant. This is a story of Raven who stole the water from Petrel, who was guarding it. And Petrel lived next to this natural spring, and Raven came to visit, and Petrel was distrustful of Raven because he knew he was a tricky fellow, and he said, so he kind of whiled away the hours until it became dusk, and Raven said to Petrel, he says, "Hey brother, I'm just gonna stay here the night, but I'll be continuing on my journey in the morning." And so Petrel falls asleep, and so Raven takes dog feces and he smears it on Petrel's butt, and he says, And then the daybreak comes. He's like, "Hey, brother, you defecated on yourself in the middle of the night." And Petrol is like embarrassed, and he runs off and he goes to clean himself. And Raven swallows up that entire natural spring of water. And so he's so engorged with water, he tries to fly away, and he can't contain all the water inside of him. So he's flying, and as he's flying, it's dribbling out of his mouth. And so it creates the rivers and the streams and the oceans. So that's the origin of the water. And this is one of like what I call like my showstopper. This is like a very technical piece. It looks, it's very complex and several pieces of glass that are made at in different sessions and then all brought together in the end and melted together. Canoe Journey is a big thing on the Northwest Coast. A lot of the local tribes in the Puget Sound region, or we actually call it the Salish Sea. They've been creating a ceremony around paddling canoes from place to place. This is a soul catcher, which is a shaman's amulet, which to me just basically just references the spirituality of the tribe. And since I've been doing this for 25 years or more, just trying to find different things to make in glass, and this is an homage to basketry, these pieces here. So in 2000 I met Joe David. In 2001 we made the Pilchuck Founders Totem Pole. And it was David Svensson who had the idea to do it. And this is the guy that I met in 1988. He was the guy that when I first pulled out my books and I was trying to trace designs out of a book and like how do I transfer it onto the glass, he asked me about my interest in Northwest Coast art, and he says, "Yeah, well, I've been living up in Haines for the summers for the past 10 years, and I've been working, carving Tlingit style totem poles and carvings and masks, and so he really encouraged me in the first place to travel or to develop this work. So we made this. So I got really excited about this after an exhibition that we had put together up in Haines, Alaska, where we made some small glass pieces for some native folks up there. And so we pitched the idea to Pilchuck Glass School. It's an international glass school north of Seattle. It's founded by Dale Chihuly. And so what we did is, so there's many reasons why we decided to do a totem pole. John Halberg and Annie Gould Halberg were the patrons of the Pilchuck Glass School. And John Halberg was the heir to Weyerhaeuser. He was a passionate Northwest Coast art collector. He donated his collection to the Seattle Art Museum. And then, of course, Annie was the one that really kind of drove the idea of Pilchuck with, making her husband John pay for it all. And Dale Chihuly was the inspiration behind it all. And so we thought it befitting to make this totem pole for the Pilchuck School and tell the story of the school. And so John had repatriated a ceremonial dagger back to a Tlingit family, and as a result, he was given a Tlingit name. So that was another reason why we decided to do that. So this is the totem pole. It's still on the campus today. This is 20 years later almost, this is 20 years ago. So that's the class that we taught. Helping around, we taught a class that the students helped make these glass elements. So this was a copy of the dagger that we made that John had repatriated to the family, the Jacobs family in Angoon. And so we went to the family, we asked for permission to carve a version of it, and thereby illustrating John's connection to the Tlingit tribe. So, which was by tradition the protocol to do. So we had to ask permission to do it, and they gave us permission. And so so this is Dale Chihuly. is the vision of glass holding on to the wings of the ravens. The raven brought the daylight to the world. Chihuly brought the idea of Pilchuck to the world. So that's the piece in its entirety. Patricia was wrong. I am talking about the show, the Raven Show. There's a little sneak peek here. Walter Porter was a guy that I met at 2004, and he had been working with this story, Raven in the Box of Daylight. So he was a mythologist, and he was a Tlingit man who took the stories and he would break down the mythology in a Joseph Campbell kind of way, and he would compare them to different modes of theology and mythology from all around the world. And so this was an exhibition that I really was driven to make this show. And Walter was going to help me, with the exhibition, but then he passed away. So I had to find an alternate curator. Miranda Belardi Lewis became the curator. So this was, Raven in the beginning of time. Is the world is in darkness. Raven is a white bird in the beginning. So we're illustrating this, and this is the design of the exhibition that I executed together with Juniper Shui, who's here with me, and we're looking at how we're going to reinstall this show here at the museum. So in any case, Raven, so this is kind of like the journey of Raven. He goes to the fisherman of the night. He asks, where's the daylight? And the fishermen tell him of this old man who lives at the head of the Nass River, and he has this daughter. They live there together with their family, and she's transparent for reasons I'm not sure, but that was how the story goes. And so it's told that she goes out to this stream every morning and she will scoop up the water. So Raven goes to the old man and asks if he can enter into the clan house. He wanted to see the daylight, and the old man, shoos him away. So he transforms himself into a speck of dirt, and then he floats down the river, and he floats into this little ladle, this cup that the daughter is using to drink the water, and he's kind of discovered in this water as a speck of dirt. So, and her attendants, because she's of noble class, her attendants, cast out the water. And so Raven goes back and he has to reformulate his plan. This time he transforms himself into a hemlock needle. And so this is a mobile that I've created that kind of shows Raven kind of deconstructing himself into a hemlock needle. And this time he floats into the little ladle. She swallows it, and then she realizes that she had swallowed something. This hemlock needle was actually Raven, who's now inside of her. So he transforms into a human child, so he grows inside of her. And so this is the raven, sort of a humanoid raven, growing inside the womb of the young lady. And so in the old days, they would dig a pit out behind the clan house, and they would line it with these furs. And the daughter is having a hard time giving birth, and the medicine woman comes by and says, change out those furs and put in moss. And so they do that, and then the child is born on this moss, on this soft moss. And so so this is the image of Raven sort of transforming into human form, still in the middle of his transformation there. And then so in the background you can sort of see the clan house. So it's like now that's how this raven in the form of a human child is allowed to be inside the clan house. And so And this child grows rather quickly and is very precocious and mischievous, and he's always rooting around in the clan house looking for something, looking for the daylight. They don't realize it. So, but they love this grandchild. They're really happy, that to have a new family member. These are some of the precious objects that they own within the clan house. We call it atu. It's like an heirloom. These are the things that you would, save that represent the family, the clan symbols, and what have you. And a little bit of a variety of different objects that you see there. This is like a dance staff. So in any case, Raven's basically looking for the daylight, and so he comes upon these boxes, and the first box, he wants to play with this box, so he takes it out, and he starts to play on it and sit on it, and and then when no one's looking, he opens up the box, and the stars come out of the box, and they float through the smoke hole in the clan house, and so he's really. The old man, the grandfather's really disappointed with him, but he, after a while, he kind of forgets. He finds this second box, the Raven child does, and so this time they're a little bit cautious, but they let him play with it, but they're kind of keeping an eye on him. And then finally, when no one was looking, he opens up the box, and it's the box that contains the moon, and so he takes the moon out and he chucks it up through the smoke hole, and it takes its place in the sky, in the heavens, and so this time he's really in trouble. The child is really in trouble, and so when he comes across the third box that contains the sun, the old man's like, no way, he's not getting that one. And so Raven fusses and cries and screams and hollers and refuses to eat, and he kind of gets weak and sick. And so, and the daughter goes to the father and says, well, Father, is there anything that's more important than your grandson? And he goes, oh, you're right, okay. So he takes the box down, he puts it down and says, okay, but don't open the box. And of course, what does he do? He transforms. This child now is becoming tired of being in child form or human form. So he transforms back into a raven, and he takes the sun and he flies away. And the old man notices it. He realizes instantly that he's been fooled. So he grabs onto the tail of the raven, and he's like flapping away, and so he kind of holds him over the fire, and the central fire in the clan house, and the soot from the fire turns him black, and so that's how Raven became black. So he transforms back, from the human to a bird again, and he places the sun in the sky, and the people had been living in darkness forever, and they scatter into these different realms. Some of them take off into the water, and they become the fish animals. Some of them, or the sea life, and then some of them, take off into the forest. They become the forest animals. Some of them jump into the sky, and they become the birds. And then the people that stayed, so it's that some people say, well, they stood strong and they became the Tlingit people, and some of them said, well, no, they were so dazed and confused they didn't know what they were doing, and they became the human beings. So so there you go. This is the shark. This is a bear. A bear hat. So over time, these symbols are adopted and used to represent the families of the different clans. And this is a thunderbird. This is a frog. This is kind of a typical chief's frontlet. There's the eagle. Some detail shots there. There's the raven. And this is a kind of a warrior. And this is the installation for the daylight, breaking daylight on the world. And so what we've done is created all this video to kind of enhance the space, and there's sound as well. So my accomplishments are not my own, but those of many. So this is my team that works with me, and they've been helping me with my work for about almost 15 years. So, but you know, that proverb has also a dual meaning in a lot of ways, where what it really means is that, you know, that there are people that came before me, and there are people who will come after me, and I'm just the guy that is making this work today. So I feel like I'm part of this continuum, but I'm also, you know, obviously trying to pioneer the material, and the glass material. And so for those of you who don't know, glass blowing is a very team-oriented process, and I feel like all that collective energy really kind of goes into the piece, and so there's something to it. I mean, glass artists, you know, work together. You know, we're friends. We party together. We hang out together. We celebrate together, and so it's a very social group. And so it's it's a special group of people. You know, we all keep in touch with each other, all people from all around the world. Just a little bit about some of the monumental stuff that I've been doing. This is a cast glass form. It's about 3 feet. This is the Kakawan Chief. This is the transforming killer whale. It's a half wolf, half killer whale form. The figure on the top is a shaman figure. And this is the Fog Woman story. So these are kind of a new direction for me. I work on these forms collaboratively with carvers. So I'll draw the designs out, and carvers will help me render it in carved wood, and then I'll send it over to the Czech Republic and then cast it in glass. So this was the first monumental piece that I did. This is about 2,000 pounds of glass. And so this is a story of my great-grandmother who had a pet grizzly bear as a child. So some family was out hunting, and they shot this grizzly bear, and they noticed these little cubs kind of rooting around. So they picked them up and brought them back into the village, and my grandmother raised it as a pet. This was at the turn of the century, and there was a lot of Russians in Sitka up in Alaska, and so there was a woman that made taffy, you know, saltwater taffy, and so my great-grandmother would have to go and pick berries in the fields and bring them back so she could sell them, so she could get Russian money to buy taffy for her pet. And so you can see up here is this is the grizzly bear cub, and this is her with killer whale regalia on, representing our family. And this is the second pattern that I've worked on, again with David Svensson here, and he carved for me this killer whale totem, which is my crest symbol. And then we've got the eagle on the top, and then emerging out of the mouth of the killer whale is the thunderbird, which is David's clan that he was adopted into. So this piece is just finished now in the Czech Republic, and so this is a little bit of how we stand these pieces up. So this is about 8 feet tall, and it weighs about 2,800 pounds. So that piece is done, and it's ready for purchase if anybody is interested. So a little bit about the Indigenous artist gatherings I've been involved with, like working with Indigenous people from, you know, first slide was Hawaii. This is the Maori people. So we get together as Indigenous artists from North America, Hawaii, and New Zealand. And they're really amazing, profound gatherings where we're all sharing culture and art. And of course the Maori are amazing with like their haka, the war dance, And so this is me trying to be like a Maori warrior. They're trying to teach me how to look fierce. But the Maori people are just amazing people. They're really inspiring, especially for Native people, Native North Americans, because they're unified. It's a little bit easier to unify because it's just two islands in one language, but they are clans. But they're amazing artists. Sometimes I get to work with glass there. And then collaborations, this is Tammy Garcia, Santa Clara Pueblo, some of her work. So this really kind of also helped put my work or glass art into the minds of the Native American art collector, because prior to this, it was a hard sell. And I told Tammy, I said, we should work on some pieces together, because your style would really translate well with my technique. And because I'd gone down to Santa Fe, and I sold a piece or two, and I always go back kind of like my tail between my legs, and like, whoa, didn't sell very much this year, but it's, maybe next year. And so finally, but the thing is that the pottery was just such in demand. It was like amazing. Like they would go spend like $20,000 on a pot, and in the Northwest, the glass is the really the special thing. They were, at least, well, I like to think that. But so I started to collaborate with these other Native artists, and then the Native American collectors started to look at the glass and take it into consideration. This was cultural art exchange I did in New Zealand. Brought some Aboriginal Australians up from, Australia. And we worked together on some pieces, and that was pretty cool. But in any case, a lot of this, just explorations and collaborating with other people helps me understand how people synthesize, the work that they do for the contemporary art market. Whether is it for culture, or is it for the community. And this is Jody Naranjo. This is some of the work that we've done together over the years. Her style is really whimsical, but she's a really super, sweet person and fun to work with. And when I started working with Joe David here, we had an exhibition, and he was the one that sort of brought to our attention. He says, the materials that we work with as Native Americans are becoming increasingly rare. The big cedar trees for the totem poles, or for the dugout canoes, or what have you. And so you'll see new materials being adopted and used for to keep the cultural symbols alive. So anytime I get to work with Joe is really always special. And this is a water guardian spirit that we called it. This piece. It's very typical of a kind of a dance headdress. And every time I get a chance to work with Joe, he really kind of pushes me in new directions, and it's and I push myself and able to do more and more incredible things. These are whaler shrine spirit figures. Basically are effigies to deceased whalers. So they were the southern, the Makah and the Nuu-chah-nulth were the southernmost whaling tribes. Lewis Gardner is a Maori artist, a jade carver. So these are some of the things that we've done. There's a whale rider in his culture, and the Natslane in my culture. So yeah, just all kinds of things to explore and try. I get to work with guys like this Buffalo Man. And these are from his Choctaw culture. These are mound builder forms. And Harlan Rayano, his design work is really pretty intricate. And then Lisa Telford is a Haida weaver. And so I was going to share with you, this little music bit here because the, as I've sort of gotten back to my musical roots, and I have a band that's a Native American group, and we call ourselves Ku'ik, which means potlatch in the Tlingit language, and there's Native American members. We started to work with this man, Bernie Worrell, who was like one of the keyboard players for Parliament Funkadelic. He was an amazing, a rock star in the true sense. So, and we befriended each other, and we started to work together. So, this is some of the music that we've created. We lost 2 members of our group in the process of recording. But anyway, so there you go. Any questions? I pretty much told you anything, so I don't imagine there are any questions. So.
I have a process question.
Oh yeah.
To the matte finish versus the cuts, you're sandblasting or something?
Correct. Yeah. So everything I do is basically a stencil process. So I'll cover the entire form with the rubber tape, and then I'll sort of cut out areas. I'll draw on it, and then cut out areas, exposing the area to be carved, and then I'll sort of wear it down with a sandblasting process.
Okay.
And then I'll usually frost everything overall. Sometimes I'll leave shiny highlights to kind of, contrast for the design work.
Fantastic, thank you.
Yep.
Can you say something about permission or authority that you need to get to be able to use some of the imagery that
Yeah.
you incorporate?
Well, so in kind of in a nutshell, the Tlingit tribe is split into 2 moieties. We call them the eagle and the raven. So, so my mother, my grandmother, great grandmother, and so on are all eagles. So you're born into your mother's moiety, and by tribal law, you may marry over to the raven side of the tribe. And so it's very complex, but there's a lot of issues of intellectual property because all of these stories basically are owned by certain certain clans. And so under each eagle or raven, there are different animal symbols that represent that particular clan. And so, when you've got all this intermarrying or marrying over to the opposite moiety, there's a sense of what was reciprocity. That's what I'm trying to find. Getting tongue-tied after speaking so much. Reciprocity. And so, you're always honoring the opposite moiety. So you're constantly, that's the system that that was in place, for thousands of years, and that's how it is. So, there are certain stories that are, and objects, designs that are owned by certain families. So you would never make that, that symbol in that exact way, because that would be stealing, that you have no right to own that because it's not part of your family. So over time, it's gotten a little bit looser in terms of some of the permissions, like the Raven story is one that's such a well-known story, and it's shared by, many different clans across, up and down the coast from like Vancouver area on up into Alaska. But so you have to kind of understand, where, the origins of these stories, and be able to recite some of the history around it, or which clan it's owned by. So, for certain stories, because in the old days, the stories, the songs, the dances, the objects were all intertwined. There was maybe a story that had a song, and the song had an object, and so they would maybe be performing, telling the story and using masks to kind of do the storytelling. And that mask, took on sort of a particular importance of its own, or it could be a hat, an elaborately carved hat, and then you would have to honor it by distributing gifts to people, in a potlatch ceremony, and that is really complicated, but it's, to explain, but it's. So yeah, so in some cases it's really important to have like the blessing of certain people and the elders, and that you're doing it in the correct way, and that. But the thing for me is that I also say that the system that we used to use for making art has been effectively dismantled, because in the old days it would be the clan chiefs that would commission the artwork of the artists to be made. So, but there was a time when they were in control of all the wealth in the region. They controlled the land, they controlled they would amass a certain amount of wealth and food, and they would host people, host the neighboring clan for a ceremony. But today the clan leaders are a little bit more like figureheads for our culture, and they're no longer, not to say that it doesn't happen, but it doesn't happen with as much regularity, to be commissioned to make something for our community. So the artists, we're kind of forced to go to the commercial market, so selling our work to people, to non-natives, to people who want to own the work that we make. But so part of the thing for us is that, if there were no good practicing working artists, there would be no good art. So therefore, we have to make a living. But so for me, I kind of see my work, I'm constantly practicing. So if I were to be asked to make something for my community, I have the skill and I have the experience, and I know that what I can do will be of quality. So part of it is part of the work that I do is kind of raising awareness of the cultural art that comes from the Tlingit people. So that's kind of, and by working in glass, I'm also kind of preserving it in a new way. There's examples of ancient Egyptian glass that has survived for thousands of years. So potentially these pieces could last for that long. Glass also it's a very strong material, but it's also very fragile. So just like our lives. So that's kind of it's a nice way to think about it, because it has the potential to be long, have a long life. So that's some of the thoughts that I have around that. Yes?
You mentioned you have a 19-year-old. I'd be curious, how has your art and your heritage influenced him?
Not at all. No, he's, I don't know, maybe, it's nothing that's showing itself like, right now, but he's in business school, so, it was funny because I'd take him to shows. I mean, he's been around art his whole life, and I'd take him to galleries, and, he'd be walking around, I was like, what does a red dot mean, Papa? And I was like, oh, well, that means the piece sold. He goes, okay. So he's like, kind of come around, he's like, oh, you sold 4 pieces. And then I'm introducing him to all these people. This guy's he's the guy that bought the big totem pole. You saw a picture of that. And he was like, yeah. I was like, what does he do? He's an investor. Introduce him to another guy. This guy just bought this piece, the one that you liked. And he goes, well, what does he do? He's like, well, he's an investor. He's like, I want to be an investor. So, so there you go. Maybe he wants to buy the art that, rather than make it. But then my daughter, I have a daughter who's also, she's creative and she's a photographer. She loves to, and she wants to become an illustrator. And so, yeah, so she got the creative gene. Yeah. Yes?
So, if by heritage you do not have access to the imagery, where do you think your work would go on?
If I didn't have a connection to the tribal community, so to speak, I probably would have been some burned out rock musician. I mean, in my original, in my formative years, it was kind of classical glass blowing. I mean, it was influenced by Italian work, but then I really wanted to kind of find my own voice or my own little niche, so I decided to turn to my culture, and when I did that, it was sort of that's when all the doors kind of opened up for me and led me to my ultimate success, and though it wasn't automatic, it was a lot of hard work, and I had to learn how to draw, and I had to learn how to, I had to learn the stories. I had to connect with mentors. I had to, do all the hard work around that. But it's, it doesn't feel like work when you're enjoying what you're doing. So, fortunately, I found those teachers and mentors to help me along the way. So that was a fortunate thing. All right. Thank you.
Coming soon to a museum near you. So many of us are shifting from the art museum to Vora Restaurant for dinner. It's the wonderful restaurant that's on East Douglas, right across the street from the Hillcrest. And for the rest of you, thank you for coming this evening. Now you can see why I'm so excited, and hopefully you too have just that much more anticipation for February 1st when we'll pull back the doors to the gallery and see Raven and the Box of Daylight. Both of them, Juniper's got to come back and work hard with the team here. Kirk Eck in the back of the room to pull it off. So mark it on your calendar, February 1st next year. Thank you. Thank you, New York Society.